The pace of updates by Tesla for full self-driving is through the roof. Today, we'll review every single comment and tweet that shows how not only Tesla retail investors, but now institutional investors in Uber are reacting. Bet you didn't know, but Uber CEO actually sold 30% of his Uber shares last week. We'll also do a complete rundown of every new feature that is upcoming in the next few versions and how fast these releases are coming. And for fun, we think we can forecast which release will be ready on August 8th. ARK Invest also weighed in, saying that by June, FSD will be 25 to 100 times better than what we have now. I've got Hans Nelson joining us. He has his own YouTube channel called Hans C. Nelson. He's one of the best to really dive deep into full self-driving. Not as great as James Dalma, but you're right up there, Hans. Thank you for joining
Not
me.
even close. Yeah, James is he is a special gem for the Tesla community, and definitely have appreciated all of the opportunities that I've had to talk to him and get a little bit smarter. But it's definitely an area that I try to understand as deeply as I can.
Yeah, you take somebody like me, then you translate it, and then you go James from you through you. You're that middle person explaining what he's saying. Thank you for doing all that. But another person that I believe people should start following is Lord Pretty Flacco. He's been joining us in some of our spaces these days. But one of the things he does is he's actually done a real deep dive in Robotaxi business model. Alexander Mertz really likes his Robotaxi business model. He'll come on to my show, we'll do an interview, and he'll dive deeper into that. But in meanwhile, he's been tracking a lot of events regarding FSD. So let's take a look at this. May. This is just May. This is like this month. That's the first 2 weeks of this month. So you got Adam Jonas from Morgan Stanley. He actually drove the 12.3.6 experience, and he very much thought it was good. Elon tweeted out accurate analysis about Gerstner's video, basically saying that only about 1 mile out of 10,000 miles of distance is useful for training. And then he said the limiting factor for FSD progress was AI training compute, but now it's validation as the interventions are so rare. This is where data matters. How many driving matters, because it's like those very small parts of to find an intervention. On May 7th, he also tweeted the latest version of Tesla's supervised self-driving will blow your mind. He's done that before. Uber CEO, he said, I would never underestimate Elon Musk and Tesla. I wouldn't underestimate what we bring to the table. We're in a great position to work with all electric vehicle manufacturers as the technology develops safely. We showed that video also. Elon tweeted, probably start rolling out 12.4 next week, fixed in 12.4 regarding the nag. That's coming out, and apparently 12.4 is actually being released today to employees. 12.4 has almost completely retrained models. The final touches are for comfort. It sometimes accelerates or brakes too fast. 12.5 and 12.6 are already in various stages of testing, and they're getting into rare, complex situations. Like what happens if you go down a narrow one-way road, you see a road closure, the only way out is through reversing. How do you do that? And maybe we need to communicate that to the rest of the fleet as well. So then he said Tesla's half a decade ahead or more. Tesla China breaks ground in Megapack factory. Baidu's general manager for autonomy, said that they'd consider partnering, cooperating with Tesla's upcoming Robotaxi in China. This is Baidu, basically the leader, according to most people. They have 500 autonomous cars right now in I don't know how many cities, 12 plus cities in China, and they're going to grow to 1,000. Yet he said this, and then 12.4 internally released this weekend, roughly 5 to 10 times improvement versus 12.3. And 12.5 will be out late June, major improvement in miles per intervention and single stack, meaning even the highway is now going to move to the neural net version. Cybertruck is going to get FSD also in 12.5. And then we'll review this. ARK Invest says that it's a 25 to 100 times improvement. What's your thoughts on all of this events in just the last 2 weeks?
I mean, it's been very just like hard to process all of the announcements and the comments by Elon especially. My favorite is just seeing the fact that 12.4 and 12.5 he specifically said are each, basically full retrains of the model. And that means that they're at a point in time where the overall improvement from version to version should be larger steps. And so if we're able to make steps faster and each step that we take is a bigger step forward, then that means we're making progress towards that robotaxi potential future at a much faster pace today than we have been. And so I think that's the biggest thing to be excited about and the biggest thing to keep an eye on as we actually get this 12.4. Hopefully, I've definitely have seen confirmation that 12.4 is in the hands of employees now. And so hopefully we'll see that come out to customers here shortly. And then the other piece is that it seems like we're on roughly somewhere between 30 and 60 days between these full point releases between 12.3 and 12.4, and then 12.4 and 12.5. Um, and the fact that 12.6 is already in the validation stage, he did say that, they're struggling somewhat to figure out how to validate now that the edge cases that they're dealing with are getting so rare. And so we'll have to just monitor and see if that ends up causing delays, if it takes them longer to figure out how to do all that validation. But man, that is such a good problem for the team to have now, because if they're struggling to validate failures at this level, then that means that when it's in the hands of customers, there should be very, very few interventions. And so the potential that we have to see the user experience on version 12.6 just dramatically improve is huge. And then also the comments on, 5 to 10x improvement in the number of miles per intervention on 12.4 compared to 12.3. That's a big piece of data as well. So all of these just kind of, if you combine them together, that were, like I said, big steps forward from version to version, and then each time that we do that, that seems like we're able to make those steps faster and faster. It's very exciting.
I love that Elon is so involved. I mean, every single day, the last 2 weeks, the last 3 months, he is talking about Tesla, talking about FSD. And you can see like you said, a lot of confidence because you can see that they're tracking things, they're talking about things that are, just about, nailing down the intervention. So at this point, it's looking like this is headed in the right direction. We'll talk about Brett's suggestion about 25 to 100 times improvement by June, and we'll talk about the forecast of what we're thinking is coming next. But in the meantime, I did not know this, but Uber CEO apparently sold 30% of his stake in Uber last week. This is just weeks after Elon announced an upcoming Robotaxi. Um, you know, Transpider said large insider sale at Uber. CEO of Uber, Dara Khosrowshahi, sold $33 million worth in shares. I don't know if this means anything. I wouldn't jump on it too much. This was his first time selling since November 23. I don't know if that makes a difference. So this is just insider, information that was sold out there. So let's talk about the upcoming commentary. This is the roundup of commentary related to the upcoming FSD versions. Again, thank you, Lord Pretty Flacco. You should follow him on X. So the things that Elon or somebody else has said about version 12.4, right? So this is now coming out. Tesla employees are playing with this at this point, 12.4. The nag's been removed, right? Final touches are for comfort, avoiding accelerating, braking too fast. I don't know. I don't remember what they said about Smart Summon and Auto Park. If that's coming in 12.4 later, that is certainly the features we're waiting for, but I've not heard that it will be. That would be a shock if it came with 12.4 versus 12.5. Elon has said 12.4 is a big release, should arguably be 13. 12.4 is a major improvement, and 12.5 is a whole other level. I mean, of course, this is the words he's been using. 12.5 will be late June, might nail it, as in when he was talking about hand signals, because there was a conversation and he goes, I think 12.4 will do it, but by 12.5, you should be able to recognize hand signals. And then he talked about that, the rare scenario. Major improvement in miles per intervention and single stack will come by 12.5, Cybertruck compatible. It does feel like 12.5, the way he's talking about it, it's also another whole other level. What's your thinking about the features here?
I would just echo some of the comments that we made in a previous show that I think that 12.4 is likely one of the first versions of FSD that was trained on their larger cluster that they had, not the largest one that they have now when Elon said that they are no longer compute constrained, but probably the one that was roughly 15,000 H100 equivalents. And then 12.5 might also be trained on that exact same size cluster. And then 12.6 could potentially have been trained once they bumped that up to, over 30,000 H100s. And so the the addition of all of these features, whether it's removing the nag, whether it's getting into very difficult situations like, going down that one way street and then having to back out because it's so narrow, that we're talking about just levels of improvement in the functionality of the system. And we're able to get to that point because we finally have really all the pieces in place, whether it's really just having the data engine of all of these 5 million vehicles on the roads. It's a real world search engine to find the exact right piece of data to update this system, and really having that whole plumbing that's necessary to get this data ready to be processed by a training computer, like just fine tune and humming and working so well. And then on top of that, building up this ginormous cluster of H100s that can do this training, and then having a very well defined Q&A um, process afterwards to make sure that once they do these training runs, that the quality of the model basically fixes 99% of all of the issues that could cause a problem in the real world. And then from there, going into their various releases to customers, like all of that stuff, these are hard problems. They had to be solved over long periods of time, and they required a lot of resources. I don't know that we could have arrived at this point really any faster. I really think that the H100 cluster that they have right now is a necessary piece in order for them to fully solve this. And it wasn't, NVIDIA wasn't able to make those H100 clusters that are as capable and as powerful as they are until this last year. And so there really wasn't a way, even though Elon was very optimistic about the possibilities of solving FSD. I don't think there was a feasible path for us to fully solve this problem before now. And it seems like all the pieces are finally in place, and we'll just have to continue to keep a close eye on it over the next year. But I think that right now, I have a lot more confidence that this is the tool set, this is the pathway, and that these are all the pieces that we need in order to basically be able to monetize, at the very least, full self-driving in the hands of customers as a level 2 to level 3 system at a much, much higher level than we have today, and potentially even getting all the way to robotaxis within the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, like what you said, all the work we've done, we're here. Can you believe it? Like in a month, in 1 month, right? By the end of June, we're gonna actually have reverse. We're gonna have smart summon. We're gonna have banish. We're gonna have a much, 5 to 10 times improvement. This is coming like this week, maybe next week. We'll all have experience with 12.4, but by 12.5, even the hand signals will be resolved. They're going to work on
Yep.
the reverse on a weird thing. It becomes like this could be the moment when we go, okay, it's here. Like many of us are already jumping to that conclusion, but
Mhm.
really, when you get the final features, when you get that it's here, let's take a look at what we're expecting in the future here. What's coming soon? This is what we just covered. This is 12.5 and 12.6 is various stages of testing. What's also interesting is if they're already here, they're already at this point testing 12.5 and 6, but soon they'll be testing 12.6 and 13. They could already be playing with 13 at this point. 12.4 has gone out to employees. It includes a new vision-based attention monitoring system and remove the steering nag in certain situations. They don't talk about reverse or banish or summon, so that's the part where we don't know where that's coming. But if we look at the release cadence, again, this is all coming from Lord Perdifaco. Thank you to him. You can see here that he's been tracking for ever since version 12 went to version 12.1, 12.1 and December 22. It took 28 days for 12.1 to be released, 50 days for 12.2, 31 days, 12.3, and then 67 days to get to 12.4. But remember that that jump from 12.3 to 12.4 was pretty massive. I think what was it? He called it, it wasn't like a rewrite, but he said that was retrained. Everything's
Yeah, a
been
complete
retrained.
retrain of the neural
Yeah.
nets.
And then 12.4, 12.5 is estimate to be 38 days because Elon has said by June 25. So on average, we're now seeing 36 days, like pretty well every 1 month, there's going to be an update. The high is 50 days, the low is 28 days. Um, Wait, 36 days. So somewhere in the middle there. And then if you look at what we think in the future, oh, sorry, I should have shown this, which is just the table by itself. um, the future versions of the release release, then if this is the case and this is the way it works, then we should see 12.5, right? By June 24th, maybe, slip till July 8th, but by August 8th, you should see version 13. Version 13 by August 8th, and then certainly by, I think he put April 23. So that's like August. That's almost like 9 months later. I don't know why he made that huge jump. That's when we're going to get the version 14, I guess, assuming that there's lots of point releases from 13 to 14.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd be curious to know how many point releases he's assuming in between, version 12 and version 13 to say that we would potentially be there on 8.8, but we're definitely tracking towards having a much more advanced version than 12.3 by that point in time. Um, Even, if they're already QAing 12.6, at the very least we should have that before 8.8, and depending on how many releases they do in between there and 13, I mean, it could very well be that we go straight from 12.6 to 13. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to just continue to do a whole bunch of full retrains, um, without eventually going ahead and doing that version release. And maybe 13 is where we get smart summon and banish and those things. Maybe those are additional pieces of functionality that warrant that full number update instead of just a point release. And we just have to see. I mean, it is curious how Tesla decides to number those versions.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense. Like by version 13, maybe that's the one they can say it's feature complete. It's got everything you need for it. And now we're just going to go after engagement because that could be the next milestone, right? When they say, okay, I think I can
And
do
I
everything now. Yeah.
Yeah, I really do like the fact that they have the vision, driver monitoring system, and that they
Hmm.
can remove the steering wheel nag. He said, right now it's in certain situations. I'm sure that will expand over time, that it will be more and more situations the longer that they have to test it and to validate it. They obviously have to make sure that the safety is in place and that the system does a good job of making sure that the driver is attentive, all those things. And that's going to take time and data and all that to do. But we could be looking at a piece of functionality in the vision only driver monitoring that allows the driver not to have to physically interact with either the brake pedal, the steering wheel, or
Hmm.
the accelerator at all, while they are actually monitoring the FSD system, which would be, I think, something that a lot of people complain about in certain areas where it's just tough to have to be bumping the steering wheel constantly as you're in certain traffic scenarios.
Oh, when you get to Robotaxi, you won't need any of that. You don't need
Yep.
driver monitoring. Yeah, you don't even you might need some in-cabin camera to monitor what's happening inside, but you don't need all this nag, you don't need the nag for sure. And then
Mhm.
just have less and less. And this is the transition we're seeing there. So let's talk about the rate of progress of how much bigger, how much better the next releases are going to be. And so ARK Invest weighed in on this, threw in some numbers based on his very rough analysis, but it's very eye-opening when you listen to this. So back to Elon when he said this, 12.4 is going to internal release this weekend and limited external beta next week. roughly 5 times to 10 times improvement in miles per intervention versus 12.3. That's a massive jump, not just an incremental jump. Then he said 12.5 will be out in late June. We'll also see a major improvement in miles per intervention and in single stack, no more implicit stack on highways. Okay. So then Brett Witten from ARK Invest said, well, that suggests a 25 to 100 times improvement in FSD by June. So if you think that his June comments that FSD 12.5 is actually also a significant step up, then it could be, instead of 5 to 10 times now, it'll be 25 to 100 times by June. Barring a performance improvement drop off, I put the Robotaxi commercialization threshold at 12.8 or 12.9. That's where we're thinking. Maybe it'll come out by August 8th. It could all be in track by then. Though perhaps they will reversion to FSC unsupervised version 1. So instead of calling it that, they'll call it unsupervised version 1. And, it doesn't have to come out August 8th. It can come out, sometime later this year. But the point is that, we're on track and it seems like it. Why drive when you can be driven? Then Sam Corris came out and he said this. His analysis is very crude, but I don't think it's fully registering for people that with an update, they made to intervene 7 times per year to drive. So if once you get this update, based on the miles per intervention, at some point it'll just be 7 times per year. So right now he's using the number 183 miles per intervention based on Tesla FSD tracker website. And then if you do a 10 times improvement on that, that's one intervention for every 1,830 miles between critical disengagements. And if a person drives 14,000 miles per year, then that means 7.6 critical disengagements per year. And that's an update, not the end state. That's just this update that's coming now. That's his thing. He's using this FSD tracker that says for each of, as you move on by FSD beta numbers, this is the number of critical disengagements, and they do a track of that. And then somebody said, curious where this data is coming from, because in his experience, 183 miles per intervention seems crazy high. This is for him compared to the experience I currently have in my city. That Sam said it's Tesla FSE tracker. That's why I said it's very crude. So, what's your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think to revisit Brett's numbers just for a second, if Elon said it's 5 times to 10 times fewer or more miles per intervention or, fewer interventions per mile, whichever way you want to look at it, then if you do that again and you assume it's 5 to 10 times for 12.4 to 12.3 and then another 5 to 10 times for 12.4 to 12.5, that's where Brett's, 25 and 100 upper bound and lower bound come from because 5 times 5 is 25, and so if they're both 5 times increases, then you end up with a 25 times total increase. But then if they both end up on the high end and they're both a 10x increase, well then that's where you get to a 100x increase by the time we have 12.5. But either way you look at it, those are exponential improvements. And that's, I think, the big takeaway here is that right now we are capable of providing exponential improvements in the number of miles per intervention between point releases. And that means even if it's, say a when Elon says a big step forward for 12.5 versus 12.4, but in his mind that's much less than that 5 to 10 times, maybe that's only 2 times. If you even say it's 2 times, but every single point release is 2 times, that's
Mhm.
still only, a few complete iterations of doing 2 times, 2 times, 2 times over and over again. That is still an exponential curve, and it still gets us from now to the point where you're only intervening once per hundreds of thousands of miles in a few short months from now, definitely within 24 months. And so that's the thing just to keep in our minds is that we are right now on an exponential curve, and until we see data that shows that that exponential is tapering off or slowing down, that we are on the trajectory to massive improvements in the need to actually intervene in the system at all, almost ever.
Yeah, so if you believe this, so this is Ashok Elaswamy said, right? He had the earnings call of all places. He actually said, we have a dashboard We tracked all the critical disengagements. We know which ones occur the most important, and we're going down. And then he said that we actually know how long it takes to address each of these, because once they have a disengagement, they feed it the data, they look for these video clips, they train with good driving behavior, and then this neural net figures it out on its own. Then they know, because they do quality improvement, they test to see if it figured it out, and then they know, okay, it's actually solved it. That's one. Then they go to the next one. So if they've got that list, then that's how you can then say it's 5 times better. How? Because like a lot of people, I think you said it, right? You told me that. How did he say 5 times better? He wouldn't say 5 times better or 10 times better if he didn't already know what the miles per intervention is, if he didn't already know what the the rate of what it's going to happen. I mean, it's Elon. He could have just thrown that number out, but normally he's wrong with dates. I think by this date it'll be done, but if he says 5 times or 10 times, he's very accurate. Also, he's he's got that dichotomy about him. So that's just something to think about. So let's take a look what institutional investors are saying now. If Gene Munster, it's great to see the change, the thinking, and how it's just everybody's starting to understand that this is a real thing. This is just a 1 minute clip here.
Well, I think that both of them will have a profound impact from AI. And if we start with Tesla, this, of course, is not a growth period for the company. Deliveries this year are going to be down slightly from last year. It's just a remarkable revelation related to the slowdown in the business. But I do believe that FSD is a massive opportunity for them, and that, of course, is powered by AI. If you look at what they've achieved on FSD over the past 3 months, it has been remarkable. The acceleration in miles driven that grew 73% in the March quarter. That compares to a 56% growth in the September quarter and 64% in June. So we see an acceleration of autonomous miles driven off of a higher base. That is an indication that something is happening. Now that, of course, is driven by AI.
What's your thoughts on his comments?
It's definitely the most important metric. It's the thing to watch because that is what we are trying to achieve is we want all the miles driven to be driven autonomously. And so if you're tracking, okay, what is the growth rate in the number of miles that are driven autonomously? That should give you a lot of insight into where this is headed. And it is growing exponentially right now. That March one was partially driven by that free trial that was given out. But we are
Right.
seeing that some of the customers that were on the 2024.8.9 branch, I believe it was, that was stuck on version 11. We have seen at least some of them, I don't know about all of them, now actually getting to try out version 12. And along with getting to try it, they are getting their free trial as well. So it seems like there is an expanding new group of free trial users. And then if we combine that with an increased take rate, we could still see a very elevated growth rate in the number of miles that are driven on version 12. And then the other thing is the better the software gets, the more people are going to want to use it. That if it's, without the nag and with significantly fewer interventions, I think that makes it much more likely that people will find it valuable enough to pay for. And then to top it all off, Tesla has already signaled that they're willing to bring down the price of FSD to a price point that people are more willing to pay, especially in this phase right now where they are really trying to accumulate as much data as possible. And it's not just, they do have the entire fleet that is able to find data that's worth training on. But now what they need in order to talk to regulators is we have actually had the system active. And it's not just the shadow mode miles
Right.
or the miles where the cameras were finding the scenarios that we needed to train the thing. They actually need miles that FSD was actively on and there were no crashes or safety critical incidents. Like they need that piece of the pie in order to begin having those conversations with regulators. And so I think that we're going to see them continue to be aggressive with pricing on FSD to try and bring in more and more users. It's, not only does it help them accumulate that data that Elon has talked about that they need. I think it was roughly 6 billion miles worth of data
Hmm.
on active FSD usage, in order to convince regulators that it is safe enough. So we're moving towards that. We're trying to collect all that data, but at the same time, right now, as vehicle unit deliveries are, we're not growing those this year potentially. That while every extra bit of FSD revenue that they can bring into the bottom line does grow our profitability, and I think that that kind of is another piece that is in the back of Elon's mind as they're trying to, um, for
Hmm.
instance, lower the purchase price from $12,000 down to $8,000 for FSD, which was a very surprising move, based on the comments that he's made before about it getting more and more expensive over time, not less and less. But I think it's just kind of a unique point in Tesla's growth where they want data and they actually can use the money to accelerate, or, maybe even if it's, improving their profitability on the gross margin line, they can still take that money and then reinvest it back into the either purchasing of a larger H100 cluster, which they're continuing to grow, or into other areas of developing that next generation robotaxi platform. Like, they're going to be spending money aggressively. I think there was a comment that Elon made actually on Autonomy Day that once they solve this FSD problem and they're really
Hmm.
working on developing their robotaxi network, that they plan to run the entire company at cash flow break even as they aggressively invest in building up this Tesla owned fleet of robotaxis.
Wow. And he also said that by the end of this year, he expects to have enough compute that it's not needed anymore for FSD, but we can then use it for just video generation, just like Sora is, just for fun, creating a movies, just, by inputting prompts, text prompts. Um, what are you looking forward to? Because when I think about it, what is the feature that people will absolutely demand and need and find valuable to have FSD, or even just this capability? For me, it could be summon and banish, but more importantly, it's summon. Like this idea that I park the car, I go into the supermarket, and I come out and I have it come pick me up. You know, uh, I go to the park and I'm walking around the park and I go, okay, I'm gonna go home now. Come pick me up. you know, that could be the cool feature. That if I had that feature, I can see why, boy, I would. I think this is valuable. I'll pay the $200 a month. I own it outright. But you know what I mean? Like that could be one. Do you think it's banish and summon, or do you think it's just everything? I'm driving to work and I'm gonna let it turn on, and it's just so much more comfortable because even though I'm still supervising it, it is just much more comfortable that I can relax a bit.
I think it's all of the above. Different
Mhm.
people are going to have different things that they care about, and it really depends on, what are people using their vehicle the most for? Are they driving long distance a lot? Are they just driving around, shopping in town a lot? Those different types of driving scenarios, I think, are going to have different priorities for those drivers. And I think, for the long distance people, it really matters. Like, you don't smart summon and banish, like,
No matter,
obviously, that's
yeah.
a nice addition, but what they need is that
Mhm.
thing that can help just take the stress of those long distance drives off. And so for them, I think the killer use case is just the system as it is
Mhm.
today. But for more around the town type driving, then I think that Banish and actually Smart Summon really are very, very valuable features, especially if you're, trying to get into the mall or whatever, and just dealing with the hassle of parking, to have it just drop you off like it's like having your own personal valet 24/7 all the time wherever you go, not just to whatever, fancy smancy restaurant that you want to eat at. And that is very valuable, I think, for another subsegment of drivers out
Mhm.
there. And then, the other feature that you haven't mentioned, but I think is a huge one, is that ability, once we do have the robotaxi network, for the vehicle to earn money for you when you're not using it. Like,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
kind of a big deal.
Kind of
And
a big deal.
I think that, that's going to be just another, each of these things bring in a whole new group of users
Yeah.
who before it wasn't enough to convince them, but now it is. And so we really have to continue to march down that whole list of functions.
That's hilarious. By then, they might not even charge you anymore for FSD. They'll just do a cut. And
Hmm.
so you've got the car, you send it out, you get a cut, we get a cut, and now it's going to be more than the $200. Maybe there's the minimum.
Hmm.
Anyways, very interesting. Thank you so much, Hans. That was fantastic commentary, good advice, and some recommendations. Uh, Appreciate that. Follow him on his YouTube channel, Hans C. Nelson. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.